Hello and welcome to the Dewey Decibel System, the official podcast of the Buchanan District Library in Buchanan, Michigan. I'm Miguel Perez, the director of the library and one of your hosts, along with my co-host, Karen Gonzalez, and none other than Dogzilla himself, Miguel Perez, filling in for Grant Wagner, who is busy fulfilling his duties as Mr. Buchanan. So, hey, Karen. Hey, Miguel. How's it going?
Hello.
Hey, what's happening?
Okay, if you don't know who Dogzilla is, then I know you have not been listening to our podcast all the way through to the end. So, Miguel, a.k.a. Dogzilla, can you introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Well, hi. I'm Miguel Dogzilla, I guess. That sometimes, a joke goes too far. But, yes, I'm happy to be a guest on the podcast. I know the library director personally, so this was kind of a favor to her. But Dogzilla was sort of I would say, an acting kind of interested in making like electronic music. Like, I want to dabble in this. So I was like, if I was going to be an electronic music artist, I think Dogzilla would be a cool name. And then, so it just kind of took off from there. And Meg said she needed a theme song for the podcast. And so I was like, well, just call it Dogzilla. Like, I didn't want to take any credit for it, but apparently
I may have just done that on my own. I don't remember if I asked you. So the personal connection, just so everybody knows, this is my husband, Miguel. So, yeah, I don't think I wrote it anywhere into our script to say that. But, yeah, so he's been a friend of the podcast from the beginning, helped us figure a lot of this out. So definitely a good person to be here today. And thank you all for being here today. All of you guys are going to be our special guests for the day. Today's episode is way different from what we normally do. Instead of doing our usual thing where we talk about books, movies, TV shows, music, video games, or pretty much anything else we want to check out or we want to talk about, as long as we check it out with our library card. Today, we are going to take a step back and tell you all about podcasting itself. Since, as you know, Karen, we are experts at this now that we've done 5 whole episodes, right?
Yeah, it gets a little easier.
Yeah, do you feel like an expert yet?
Not quite.
An honest answer.
Right. We're getting there.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, we do feel qualified to give you this intro to podcasting program, partly because when we started our podcast back in November, we really did discover that it's actually kind of easy. And to make it even easier for those of you with a Buchanan library card, you can check out all of this equipment that you see us using today as part of our Library of Things. Okay, but we have a ways to go before we get into all the fun equipment. We're going to take you through 5 steps to starting your own podcast, from your initial idea all the way to putting a finished episode out there for people to listen to. And when we're done, you'll be welcome to come up to our 4th mic over here and ask us your podcasting questions. So, okay, are you guys ready to rock?
Yeah.
yes.
All right, so I'm going to start off, let's see, with step 1. Actually, I think I'm a slide behind. But, all right, so step 1, we got to develop a podcast concept. And I think this is sometimes the forgotten step, but this really happened to us, so I definitely want to talk about it. What happened was Grant, who's not here to defend himself today, so there might be some Grant trash talking coming. Sorry, Grant. Was like, let's start a podcast. And we all thought that was a fun idea, but then it was like, okay, well, about what? And Miguel, this in our personal life too, I feel like we've had at least 2 ideas for podcasts that have never gone anywhere, partly because we just never took the time to like finesse the idea into like a real finished working idea.
Well, it actually started with one of our audience members in our basement of our own house. So we happen to be in a band called River Rats.
We do.
With some of our old high school chums. And we kind of talked about how funny we are when we sit around on the couch and play Mario Kart.
Yeah, so post-band practice, our tradition was, anyway, before we all started going to bed way too early, was to play Mario Kart and listen to music. And so it'd be like we're playing Mario Kart, but we're also like discussing the music so we thought it would be funny to have a podcast where we're doing that, but it's like interspersed with, oh no, red shell, darn you. I'm really using much more polite language than we would usually use, but yeah, but we just never made that happen.
Well, and I think some of that too is, and maybe this might be, conversation for later in the podcast, but at a certain point, well, aren't there other bands that do that? Aren't there other people that do that? How would this stick out? Then you get kind of lost in the weeds, so to speak, about like, well, is my idea good enough? How can I do this and still get something out of it that hasn't been done before?
Well, I will say we did not worry about that too much with our podcast concept because we have straight up ripped off Pop Culture Happy Hour, the way that we do things. I don't know if any of you guys have ever listened to Pop Culture Happy Hour. It's a great podcast. I started listening to it when it was actually broadcast on NPR, like over the radio around here, but I don't know if it is anymore.
NPR.
Stop it. Stop it, Dairy Merbles. But yeah, we do basically exactly the same format as Pop Culture Happy Hour, but we just put a library spin on it. So, I mean, I see what you're saying, but I also kind of think that if you're having fun and you're doing something that you want to do, I mean, everything is out there in the world 10 times over at this point. So,
well, and that's what makes this kind of cool. Like just going for it, I think is the best course of action to take.
Yeah. Okay, so let's, using our podcast as kind of an example, we'll walk you through some things you might want to consider when you're developing your podcast idea. So, okay, what are your goals for your podcast? Like, what do you want to accomplish? We knew we wanted to promote the library and build enthusiasm for library use. So your goal could be similar, promoting an organization or business, or it could be talk about an issue that's important to you, or it could simply be having fun with a group of people. Like that's totally okay too. It doesn't have to be serious. What will your theme or topic be? So your theme should definitely be something that you would be excited to talk about on a regular basis. And for a decent amount of time. Our episodes are over an hour long, which may be too long. I've heard some feedback that they're quite long. But honestly, when we're doing it, they feel like they go by so fast, don't you think, Karen?
Yeah, because like when we're like at first it gets kind of like scary and you're just like, oh, are we gonna hit the time? And then once you like really get into it, it gets fun because the conversation goes and then you're like, oh snap, we have to watch the time.
Yeah. Right, and I think that's because we
Mm-hmm.
picked every episode's a little different, but we just picked to talk about things that we're interested in. So it's really easy for it to go that long. So, if you feel like you're going to run out of what you have to say after 5 minutes, then that's probably not the topic for a podcast. And your theme should be something that you can continue to make episodes about. So try to come up with like 10 episode ideas. And if you struggle, you might want to go back and revise your concept. Maybe it's just a little bit too specific, something like that. We love that for our concept, it can go on kind of endlessly because we're just talking about like the whole world of literature and media and entertainment. Like we just have a vast array of things that we can talk about. And then I think this is actually really important too. What are you going to call your podcast? So we actually had the name, the Dewey Decibel System, picked out before we knew anything else about what we were going to do. Your name really sets the tone for your podcast. So like you can see with ours, it references libraries in like a clever and a playful way, which I think is really perfect for our show and what we're trying to do. And darn it, we have to give Grant credit for the name of our podcast too, don't we? He totally came up with that, Grant. Yeah, I think the name of your show should definitely be short and sweet. It should be easy to pronounce because you're going to have to say it a lot. So anyway, to recap, using our podcast as an example, before we did anything else, we knew that our podcast would be called the Dewey Decibel System. The goal would be to promote library use by talking about all the cool things you can check out with your library card. And before you go any farther with your podcast, we suggest that you would be able to sum up your idea in one sentence like that as well. So... All right. So I think, did I get everything? I think we're going to move on to step 2, which Karen's going to tell us all about.
All right. So step 2 is choose your podcast format. So there are a lot of different podcast formats you could go with. Here are some examples that should help you get an idea of what I mean by format. Interview or conversational. So there are some that, they sit down and just interviews, co-host or roundtable, fictional or theoretical, narrative, nonfiction, current events or news, and educational. So basically, this comes down to how your podcast is really going to work. How are you going to accomplish the goals and do justice to the theme or topic you picked in step 1? For us, we went with the roundtable style podcast, but today we're kind of the long table, where we have several hosts who get together consistently, but we do mix it up by having a special guest on each show, which not only makes it more fun for us and our listeners, but it's also a really nice way to get our whole community involved, since, we do always have a new guest, so it keeps it spicy, So you also want to think about things like the length of your podcast and keep your episodes at least somewhat consistent. We're still working on this one. And then your publishing schedule. We went with once a month, and it seems to work for us, but you could do more or less often depending on your workload, how much you can take, since this is a lot,
Yeah, definitely.
So again, using our podcast as an example, once we're done with this step, we knew our podcast would be a roundtable format, with 3 regular hosts and 1 special guest each episode. Episodes would be roughly an hour long, and we would publish 1 episode a month. And we're on step 3. Mr. Miguel, Dogzilla, I'm sorry.
Yes, he only wants to be addressed as
Only
Dogzilla.
Yeah,
Refer
that's
to me
what I
as
said.
Dogzilla. Well, this part is cool. It's step 3 is recording your podcast. So that's really essentially, after all the preparation, you got to be able to record it. You got to find a way to make a digital file, put it to be able to have something that you can put on the internet to broadcast. That's typically where you find podcasts anyhow. So, all right, you know what you're going to do and why. Now we get to talk about how the heck you're actually going to do it. We're going to focus on the equipment we have here at the library, the stuff that we are actually using to record. But there are a million ways that you could accomplish recording a podcast. So the library's podcast kit comes with a Zoom PodTrack P4, a 64 gigabyte SD card, 4 Shure PGA 48 microphones. So those are the ones with the on and off switch. 4 pairs of Panasonic, specifically Panasonic, stereo headphones, and 4 tabletop mic stands. In this case, if you can't see it, well, just take my word for it. That's what we have.
For our listeners at home, yes. Trust us.
I would also include microphone cables.
True.
That helps too. You got to be able to plug in your microphones.
Yes.
So the PodTrack P4 is really cool. It's pretty simple to use. So it's a self-contained device.
Yeah, I'll jump in here just for a second to say that Miguel was our consultant on buying this particular thing, and you were absolutely correct. We really like it a lot.
Well, and this is the kind of cool thing. Podcast is really popular right now, and it's kind of easy to be able to find this consumer level, affordable, all-in-one kind of devices. I mean, the way that we record music in our band is really different than we would do this, but essentially, if you have a microphone, plug it into something that can basically record what you're doing into the microphone and be able to have a file to put on a computer. And the PodTrack P4 really does that. It had 4 inputs for microphones, 4 headphone jacks. Every channel has their own volume. There's even some cool pads that have sounds like. You
guys couldn't hear that, but it was a rim shot. So listeners later will hear that.
So it's got some really. So I mean, essentially, I did a Google search, podcasting device. This was the most popular. Read some reviews, kind of see what the user experience is, especially if you're not terribly comfortable with the technology. This one got really great reviews. Zoom is a kind of a newer company, and they're affordable. So that was really what was attractive to it, is that anyone could take this. It takes batteries, SD cards. You could take this anywhere, and anyone can just record at any time. So that was kind of the ideal situation, especially for the Library of Things. Anyone can pick it up and take it with them. So I think without reading the script, I might have covered a lot of these things.
Yeah, so other things besides the equipment, like what do you think about like the space that you should be recording in, which I'd say today is not the ideal space, but what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you're wanting to accomplish. I know a lot of some podcasts really like being, if it's more of a narrative, they kind of like to have the atmosphere. If you're trying to have a conversation and you want the voices to be clear, probably being in a really quiet room. This room is drywall and drop ceilings and carpeted. I mean, it works fine for what it's worth, but particularly like some DIY soundproofing or like, I guess what do you call that? Like trying to get less echo off the walls if you're like in a concrete room. Like what we have we have a concrete basement. So we've done some things in our basement to help with the sound not bouncing off the walls, so it's easier for us to...
Which are literally just blankets hung on the wall that were bought at Goodwill, that sort of thing.
And there's panels you can buy. There's some really professional stuff that you can attach to your wall, even just foam pads. I mean, in some cases, we kind of tore apart like foam mattress toppers and made do with what we had. But whatever can kind of dampen the sound can really help with clarity and not necessarily needing unnecessary reverb in your...
Well, and then just picking a decent spot in the first place. Like we're recording this today in our library's community room, which is on the first floor, and you might have heard even some sounds of people, just talking. And that's because we're probably not in a good place for recording a podcast today because there is just ambient noise of other people, street noise, things like that. So if you can get away from any of that, unless, like you said, that's what you're going for. Some podcasts are sort of like, oh, we're man on the street and we're talking to people. Sometimes that is what you want, but I'd say normally it isn't.
Not typically. I mean, especially if you think about a controlled situation like a radio station. If you've ever been to a radio station booth, like where they actually have the DJs and maybe where they interview, I mean, those walls are completely covered in treatment. I mean, that sound doesn't go anywhere. So a lot of times that's kind of the ideal. But considering this is for people on the go, people want to pick it up. Maybe they've had some experience. Sometimes they don't. I think if you have clarity and you're able to, this is the cool thing about being able to control the volume of your microphone and the volume of your headphones is like, learning how to speak into a microphone directly. You can hear yourself as you're talking, and kind of having a little voice control and, trying to avoid it as much as possible. And the cool thing is this thing you can stop and then you can like hit record again. So like you can, there's a little bit of editing involved in this as well.
That's true, Yep.
Which leads us to our next.
Well, hold on. There's one other thing that I think is super important that we got to talk about when you're recording, and I think that is writing a script or at least write an outline. I think you think like, oh, I'm just going to go in and wing it, and it's going to be like really fun and off the cuff, and kind of, but trust me, you're going to want to have that safety net of like, here's what I'm going to want to do, because as soon as that red light goes on, that record light goes on, everything that you thought that you knew is just going to go away, and you're going to feel about several IQ points dumber than you normally do. So I would just say help yourself out, write a script.
Yes, because you are very awesome with making an outline and bullet points and everything.
And I don't follow it exactly or read it like word for word, but it just it's like my security blanket. It's like I know it's there if I need it. All right, so hopefully, and I know that we did kind of go quickly over just like our equipment, but you can use your phone to record your voice. You can buy, actually we have a USB microphone in our library of things as well that could plug into right into a computer or a phone to give you a little bit better sound quality if you just wanted to do it that way. So this is definitely not the only way, but it's the way that we wanted to show you because it's what we have available to you. All right, so you've sat down, you've recorded your podcast. The next step is editing, but I will say that it's possible to skip this step. Before we started doing this podcast, we were talking with one of our board members who works at the St. Joe County Public Library, and they were doing a podcast, and they just sat down in front of a microphone, record it straight through, don't edit it at all, put it on the internet, boom, done. So that's absolutely a possibility if you're just like, you know what, I'm not even messing with that right now, or it's just not necessary for whatever you're doing. But if you're editing, I want to tell you about the program that we use. There's lots of simple and free tools out there, but the one that we picked is called Audacity. It's a free program. You can download it onto your computer, and you can use it to adjust your audio, add effects like fading things in and out, and then you can mix multiple audio files together. So I've got a little screenshot up here, and you can kind of see what actually this is one of our episodes. So you can see, I don't know if you can see the names of probably not because it's a million miles away, but one of them says Heavyweights. So that was from our last episode so it was a clip from the movie Heavyweights. We've got the library theme music mixed in there, and they kind of overlap. So yeah, these are like the waveforms of our actual recordings. And yeah, so you can just see that you just kind of stack them together, and you can adjust the length, adjust where they're placed, and then it's pretty user friendly, but you're gonna have to be somewhat comfortable with technology in order to make this work. So I do think that even if you're going to do a pretty basic, like you don't do a whole lot of editing or put a ton of segments together, I do think something that's really worth to add to your podcast is music for intros and outros and transitions. So one thing you do have to be careful about is copyright, is to use copyright or royalty-free music. You can't just use your favorite Taylor Swift song. Sorry, Grant. Sorry.
We are so picky.
Grant loves Taylor Swift.
You had to get one in, didn't you?
Oh, my God. We never stop hearing about Taylor Swift. Unfortunately, you can't do that. So we had Miguel create our podcast theme song. He wrote and recorded all the music himself. So that was cool. So if you've got a musical friend, ask them to help you out. Then you get your own custom music. But otherwise, you can Google royalty-free music. You can find ready-made themes that you can use. And like your podcast name can really help to kind of set the tone for your podcast, whatever your theme music is. So I would say if you're going to do one extra thing, it would be to try to find some sort of intro music. So in this step, you're going to take all your recordings, your theme music, anything else that's part of your episode, mix it all together, and then you're going to export it into like an MP3 or a WAV file that's ready to be listened to. So it's all in one file all together. And that brings us to publishing your podcast. So like so many things we're talking about today, there are lots of different ways to skin a cat. Sorry, we were talking beforehand. Karen was really wigged out by the phrase skin a cat. She thought that people might be. She's like, what if there's kids?
Well, I don't know. Uh-oh. There you go.
Rim shot again. This, again, we're going to talk about what we do. So after you've recorded and edited your episode, you're going to want people to be able to listen to it. So you've got to find a home for it on the internet. And what we do, incidentally, is a couple of the easiest ways to get started. So first of all, I think you're going to want to check out Spotify for podcasters. You're going to want an account here. It will help you publish your episode to Spotify, which is one of the most popular platforms for listening to music and podcasts. Bonus, there are some editing tools available. So if you are not really all about Audacity, I know that there's some things right in Spotify that you can use to edit your podcast. But caveat, I have not really tried them, but you might want to check them out. So basically, you're going to upload your audio here, and you're going to add information like the name of your podcast, the episode name and description. All of that stuff is going to go here. And as you record more episodes, it will keep everything nice and organized and easy for your listeners to find all in one place. The other thing that we always do is YouTube, just good old YouTube. It's been around for a while. Old people like us like to use it still. So it's another easy way for people to listen to your podcast. And a lot of people do simple video recordings of their podcast as well. So they might set up a camera and just record themselves video. And so obviously YouTube is a good platform for that. So after you've uploaded your episodes, then you're going to have a link to be able to share it with your listeners. You are going to have to do some legwork here. I'm going to just say if you just upload it to Spotify or YouTube and you do nothing else, no one's really going to find it in the vast jungle that is the internet. You're going to share links to your podcast on social media. You could embed episodes in your website if you have one, all of that kind of stuff. But it's good to, rather than just putting a raw file up that someone can access, I'd say put it on one of these platforms first, and that's going to be a much more friendly way for people to access your podcast. One other thing to consider at this stage would be artwork. We really kind of skipped this stage, to be honest, which is a little embarrassing for me. But you can see our logo up there on the screen. And I was really in a rush when our first episode came out, and so I was just like, boom, whatever, this works. And, it's fine. But creating some kind of logo or cover art for your podcast is going to be kind of necessary. It doesn't have to be overboard. It can be really simple like what we did here. But there's some great online design tools like Canva that have free templates you can use to create something. So just have fun with it, but don't make it like really busy or complicated. It's probably better if it's on the simple side. Okay, so we have talked you through 5 steps, and now we're ready to answer your questions. So we really hope that you have some. If you do have a question, you're just going to have to come on down to our 4th microphone right here. For those of you listening later, everyone is looking at me like, please don't make me go to the microphone. But we would really love it if anyone has a question, if you could come on up and ask it.
Come on down.
Oh, you should have waited so he could hear it too. All right, so if you want to slip those on.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, yeah, you heard it.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, can you
This
tell
has
us?
been amazing.
Yeah, tell us your name and what brought you here.
My name is Nick. I'm actually from out of town, south suburbs of Chicago. I come to Michigan now and then to just kind of explore the area, see what's around, do some shopping, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pretty cool place. I've been coming here for about 3 years, and I just kind of fell in love with the area. So I happened to walk into the library to use the restroom, and you guys were kind of just...
Oh, really? You didn't even plan to come?
No,
Oh.
I didn't plan on coming here until last night, actually. I was just kind of thinking, it'd be cool to go for a little day trip.
That is cool. I like that we just got you in here like that. All right, so what's your question?
I actually just recently purchased a mic for my own PC setup as well, and I got something that has an XLR, a USB-C connection. I was wondering if you have any recommendations. I do use the USB-C now, but if I wanted to upgrade in the future to something that takes XLR, if you guys have any recommendations or like tips and tricks to use, something that takes a little bit more, phantom power, I guess I would say, because I know that the XLRs take more power and that there's stuff that you have to think about. If this is too much,
No, I'm just so glad that Miguel is here because I would not be able to answer this question.
So I had the same question years ago. At one point in time, I wanted to figure out how to record my guitar, and put it into my computer. So I did a little research. You'll have to purchase, it's called an audio interface. Real simple device. Typically would just have XLR inputs or 1/4 inch guitar cable jacks. And it's something that connects to your computer via USB. Programs like Audacity, it's basically used for your audio device for your computer. So a lot of times the one that we use on our computer, I plug in my monitors. So the audio out on my computer is through the audio interface. So it kind of acts as a hub. So there's really simple devices. We use a brand called Behringer. Again, it's another consumer level brand, but it can get really expensive and really high tech. But if you're just looking to plug in a microphone or two, you can find really simple audio interfaces, and then it's kind of a plug and play situation. You might have to download a driver. There might be software, but it's really simple.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And sorry, and then
No,
I did
go
have a question, I guess, for all of you is do the ideas ever run out?
Well, okay, so we have only made 5 episodes right now, but the way our podcast works is we each pick out something that we want to talk about. The only limiter is that we have to have checked it out with our library card. So it can really be anything. We talk about books, movies, music, video games, anything that we can get here at the library. So we have, I don't see how we will ever run out of things to talk about, which is the best part about it. And we just pick, gosh, like I said, we talked about the movie Heavyweights last time. We've talked about the movie Encino Man. We talked about, Karen's always bringing us Spyro the Dragon. We talked about
I'm the gamer.
So she's the game kind of gal. We do talk about books as well. But yeah, just things that we love to talk about. So
yeah, that kind of goes why she said before you make a podcast, try thinking of 10 episodes because you can forget. Even we pick the material. We still have to think of what we're going to say, how long, because you don't want to, have it go long either. So that's kind of yeah, you have to think of all of that. But yeah, I don't really see us running out of ideas.
No. Though we do kind of want to make sure not to like repeat ourselves. And
Yeah.
even so far, we're like, oh, well, we kind of already did one like this. Like we're trying to have a little variety. So there's,
Yeah, because like I said, like I'm I read a lot of mangas and I'm the gamer, so I like to switch it up too. So like last time I did a nonfiction book, so like it's just you also kind of want to keep it different from what you usually do.
Keep
that
it
way.
spicy, as you like to say.
Yeah, keep it spicy.
Very
So
cool.
yeah.
So I guess with you being the gamer, my last final question would be: what is the game to play? What are you playing right now? What do you recommend?
Right now I'm actually still I'm a big Zelda fan. So I actually purchased Tears of the Kingdom when I went to midnight.
Oh my goodness!
I went to
You're
midnight
getting some
drop.
eyes lighting up in the audience,
Yeah,
Karen.
I went to midnight opening launch. Like I met so many cool gamers. I loved it, and so that came out in May, and I still have not finished it. I put 250 hours on it, and I still haven't even finished the boss because I don't want it to end. So I'm like, so right now I'm still kind of on there. Right now I'm just like finding weapons because you have to find, like, since in that game everything is kind of like the apocalypse and like all your weapons are decayed, so you have to find good ones. That's where I'm at because the very bad evil boss, I heard he's hard, so I'm like, yeah, I'm not ready for that. But yeah, so yeah, I'm a Zelda fan.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
no
appreciate
problem.
you guys
Thanks.
so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for
Good luck
coming.
out there.
Yep. Anybody else want to come on up and ask a question? Oh, this guy.
Oh, now you gotta wait till he puts his his headphones. There you go. He's like, yeah.
We have another guest.
Welcome to the show. Tell us your name, sir.
Hi, my name's Travis Darnell.
Hi, Travis. Nice to meet you.
I have a question about a podcast.
Sure.
So you got your idea, you got your show, you do your show, you upload it. How do you get people to listen to it?
Well, that's a good question that I don't know that we've answered just yet. Yeah, the marketing part of it is a little bit difficult. I don't know. You guys have any thoughts on that?
Honestly, for us, it's a little bit easier just because we're the public library. So we already have an audience. So, we have Facebook, and that's how we kind of like market it out. But really, I would say to kind of get it out there, social media. You have to social media it up. Tell your friends. You know how usually you get like pestered by other people. They're like, oh, share this. Yeah, you might have to become that,
Yeah.
to get it out there. But at the same time, it's like she said, there's so many podcasts there. You have to put yourself out there now and get recognized, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's a whole other level of like getting into lists and feeds and things like that we are not really attempting to do because we're so focused on this, small community and people. We're not really looking for people all over the world to listen to us. So that is a little bit different for us. So it kind of depends on your goals and what you're trying to accomplish. But you just can't be shy about it. I'm not a good marketer in that way. Like I'm looking at these two. So Travis, you can tell everybody that you are the bass player in River Rats. So, we're a band and we have to think about marketing ourselves, and I'm not the person to do it. I'd say you two guys are much better at it because you're not shy about it. You're just going to put it. I mean, people respond to stuff like just a picture. Like I need to remember to do this. Honestly, I'm thinking it right now. Like a picture of you doing a thing. They're just like, whoa, that's so cool. So I should probably just take a picture of all of us sitting here with our headphones on, and people will probably like that way more than me just saying, oh, we recorded the podcast. Like little things like that, right? What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, we've seen it work. And sometimes time and space, depending on what your goals are. I think with something that can happen once a month, having a little bit of advertisement, a little bit of consistency. We've seen other bands, particularly thinking about bands who have podcasts and other things like that. I think just being aware of it in the first place and having a good idea. Sometimes there's just stuff out there that you're not interested in. So it's kind of tough and with that, a saturation, that amount of things that are out there, it can be kind of tough. I know we've had kind of well, how much should we put ourselves out there? And that can even be the case with someone who has a podcast. Like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I really, how much I want to put myself out there. I think that's I think it's already been answered. I'm just going to start saying the same thing over and over
Well,
again.
but I think you brought up a good point about consistency. That's something with library programs that we talk a lot about here. And sometimes when you start something new, we've learned it can take as long as like 2 years before people really catch on and kind of get it. And then they're like, oh, that's really cool that you're doing that. Is that new? And we're like, no, we've been doing it for 2 years. But so stick with it. Like don't do one episode and then think, oh, nobody listened to it. Like you have to give people some time to catch on and to, and to have a back catalog is a good thing anyway, so that once people find you, then they're going to be able to see all those other cool things you did. So it might just take a while for it to build.
Honestly, the number one thing that I've been seeing, like marketing-wise, is TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I've been finding a lot of podcasters, is because they do like a little quick snippet, and then I'm like, oh, that's
do it before it gets outlawed or whatever. Is that
right.
gonna happen?
Oh, yeah. I forgot
remember.
about
Yeah.
that. But yeah.
We do have a TikTok for the library as well. So you're right. People do.
Yeah.
They like it.
It's what's in right now.
Yep.
Well, thanks for taking my question.
Thanks, Travis.
Thanks for being on the show.
We'll see you later. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, all right. Come on down.
Okay, we have another
tall
guest.
gentleman in the back.
What a...
Well played.
Welcome
I like
welcome to the show.
Welcome, and tell us your name, please.
my name is Rich.
Hi, Rich.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, question for you. Just you talked about all the steps, right? From doing the script all the way through the end, right? Obviously, it probably changes from podcast to podcast how much you need to do, right? So, and what that looks like. But length of time investment for each of these, right?
That's
like
a good question.
What does that look like for you?
Okay, so we usually put aside 2 hours for recording, even though we're obviously not recording the entire time, just setting up and testing and just making sure everything's working right. And yeah, so I'd say it's at least 2 hours, well, depending on the length of your episode. But don't just think that the amount of time that your end result is good. Like you're probably going to have to double that, I guess, in order, right, when you say about double the amount of time to do the process as the end result that you want.
I think it depends on how thorough you want to be. If you're going the route like that you chose with not only recording into the device, but then transferring the file onto the computer,
Well, yeah, I was gonna
working
get
with
to that.
like a
So just
an
straight
editing
up, your
software.
recording time
just
is going to be longer than you think you need. And then, so for editing, a little bit of it depends on how well you do this part. So if you do a really good job, you won't have to spend as much time. But especially as I'm still learning, it probably takes me 4 hours per episode to sit down and just go through, listen to the whole thing, fix any problems with the audio, put the things together. And then maybe another hour just to export it, put it on all the things, write the post about it, get it all out there. So I'd say, for an hour-long episode, you're probably looking at 8 hours worth of work, somewhere in there, total. I think that would be reasonable to expect.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing to think about ahead of time.
Yeah. And have you noticed then, as you've done a few of these, have you been able to check from an engagement standpoint? Have you seen more and more people?
I haven't even looked. A little bit. I mean, I get people telling me, like people will come in now and be like, oh, I heard the podcast. That's cool. I checked out, like people were checking out the Neil deGrasse Tyson book because they heard us talking about it. I guess I'm still a little old school and I'm just kind of going with word of mouth. But I'm sure there's analytics I could look at. That's a good point.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Before you go, are you considering starting your own podcast?
Yes, I am.
Oh, really? About what?
Well, I have a couple ideas. I'm not sure yet, so I'm still kind of fleshing that out. So I'm very much in stage one of what you're talking about, is trying to figure out what that is, what the content is, what the format is, that sort of stuff. I do have some of the equipment already acquired, so I've jumped the gun a little bit. I think I've done stage 3 before I finished stage 1, so I need to do some backpedaling here a little bit and figure those out. But trying to put together that first step so that I can get the rest of it engaged and start rolling through it. So.
Oops, there's some traffic noise for you because we're in a bad
Fantastic.
room. Do you want to tell us what your ideas are? You want to beta test it on
They're
us?
not even fleshed out enough to even know. So
All right.
I've got a couple, and I'm just trying to work through, see what those might amount to, and if any of them have any stickiness to them or not. So.
Well, and I think that's not such a bad strategy sometimes to know you want to do it. Well, you may have the best idea in the world, but then you don't have the tools.
Right.
I think that's I think about when I'm recording music, I started with a little computer microphone. You just have to have the means to be able to do it. I mean, I think when I play music, when Travis and I have been playing music since we were in high school together, and we knew we wanted to be able to hear ourselves play our songs, so we had a boombox with a cassette tape that had a microphone on it. So we did our best we knew we needed the tools. So I think the ideas are going to come now that you have, I think sometimes it's going out of order isn't always necessarily.
Well, and I like what you said earlier too. I mean, you were talking about at some point you just kind of got to jump in and do it, right? Like you can overthink the equipment, you can overthink some of the names, and so you just kind of got to jump in there and do it a little bit, right? And so it can be very simple, like you said. You could just with your phone record, right?
Yeah.
Or you could be a little bit more elaborate. You could spend 4 or 6 hours, whatever, editing, or you could just slap it right up there. So it's just making that decision and doing some movement, I think, would be helpful. So
yeah, I think that's really right on. You don't want to be afraid. You got to be willing to kind of just go through it and make mistakes and learn as you go. I don't know that there's another way to do it.
Well, and it's a little different too. I think like sometimes you put a microphone in front of somebody or a camera, right, and they can kind of it changes everything. Like you said, your brain just kind of it can shut off all of a sudden, right, when that record button goes on.
Yep.
So there's some of that. Have you noticed any of that? I mean, you guys are obviously in a band, so it's probably very normal for you to sit in front of it. But from a guest or someone, right, to come in.
Right. It's always, and even for us, like today when we started doing it, I was like, oh, I felt like nerves. But yeah, guests especially, we find the first, I don't know, 10, maybe even less than that, 5 minutes.
Yeah, they're always kind of like very shy. I mean, like with us, we're always shy. I don't know why. We're always shy like the first 5-10 minutes, and then once we like feel the vibe and like we're more relaxed, then it's like nothing. But it also, when you're like conversating too, you kind of forget too. You're like, wait, because sometimes you jump, so you kind of have to stay too on your topic, because we do that a lot.
A little bit on task. She's pointing at me because I have to kind of be the taskmaster and be like, and the next thing.
But yeah, so yeah, I don't know.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thanks for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
And good luck out there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Let us know when you start it. We'll be listeners.
We'll do. Thanks.
Does anybody else have any questions? No?
No.
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 Okay, the answer is no. All right, so right before we go, though, we're going to our last thing would be, I want to go down the line here. What is your number one piece of advice for someone if they want to start a podcast? Miguel, you can start.
Well, this is sort of me needing to give a little advice for myself, because I think this idea has bounce around, kind of what we were talking about at the beginning. I think sometimes you just gotta do it. If it's something that you want to do, sometimes worrying about the outcome can really be defeating in the end. Like of course you want to create something that's high quality. Of course you want to do a good job. You want to have a good idea. But I think ultimately, if you don't do it in the first place, because you can think of a million reasons not to, like, well, first of all, think of whether this is the right idea for you to do in the first place. But I think ultimately, you just got to try. And if your first idea is like, well, we're going to talk about cows. And like, well, I don't know a lot about cows, so it only lasted one episode. Let's find another idea. Like, this is kind of the cool thing about what you do here, is that the library is a constantly changing thing. There's always something new coming in and out. I mean, if you actually could come to the Buchanan District Library, you can see you can't outlive the amount of content that you could actually have in a place like this. So, even for somebody personal, I guess I would say approach it that way, that you could potentially have an endless amount of ideas. And if you're really wanting to stick out, like we're a little self-conscious because, well, aren't there other bands out there that have done this? It's like, but not us. Yeah. And sometimes not you. I think sometimes you might have ideas, you'd be surprised. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. All right, Karen, what's your number one piece of advice?
I'd say have fun and be organized with it, because I struggle with ADHD. So like you having like all this, like the bullet points is so awesome. But yeah, to me it's more organization, because like, yeah, we have endless things to talk about, but your mind kind of just goes out the door when you see that little red light. So, and I don't know, like to me, it's nice when you like have your notes about what to talk about. Cause yeah, like like our podcast, we talk about other, we talk about other people's picks because we have to either watch it, read it. So even though, like with that, I like to have notes because we have to, watch or read other people's stuff, and then you have to think about your stuff. So you're just like, wait a minute,
it's
what?
A lot.
Yeah. So like that's what I'm saying. Like being organized, I'd say is like awesome. Like right here, if you were to see, I have like a stack and it with papers, and usually when we're in our regular settings, I'll have like little cliff notes. That way I know what to say, or if they already said that, I'm like, okay, another cliff note. I can say this about this book, or, because that is another thing. Like, you don't want to talk about kind of the same thing. Like, like if I'm talking about cats all the time, you don't want to talk about cats all the time. Like you just
like
want to
skinning cats.
Yeah, skinning cats. But yeah, like it's just being organized. I think it make it easier and it helps you flow better.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like the organization actually helps you make it more natural.
Because I feel like if we didn't have like the notes and we'd kind of be all over the place. And so I like, it gives us a little structure, but then you can also play with it too, so it's not like you have to hardcore go with it, but it's just, I'd say organization is the number one thing.
Awesome. That's a good piece of advice. All right.
What about you?
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Dogzilla.
Mrs. Dogzilla, yes. I think my number one piece of advice would be don't go it alone, because ultimately, this is a very social thing. And I think one of the things I've enjoyed the most about it is that I get to sit down and just have this like really dedicated time to actually having a good conversation with other people. And I think that's one of the coolest things about podcasts is it really does kind of make us slow down and talk to each other and listen to each other. And so I would say really bring in other people that that you want to get to know and that you want to be able to discuss whatever it is that is important to you. That would be the other half of it, is like really do something that you care about, that you think is cool, because your enthusiasm will come through if it's something that you really truly care about. So find your people and find your thing that you love, and I think you will have a really, really cool podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's everything that we've got for you today. So I just want to thank all of you for being here, all of our special guests who are here with us in the library live today. And then I want to say thank you to Miguel for being with us and just for being an all-around friend, supporter, and, podcast appreciator of ours. Thank you.
You're welcome.
He really likes to get up on that mic. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And we'll be back next month with another episode. Thank you for listening to the Dewey Decibel System, the official podcast of the Buchanan District Library. Thanks as well to all of our special guests who joined us at the library today. Our theme music was written and performed by Miguel Perez, aka Dogzilla, and this episode was recorded at the Buchanan District Library on March 30th, 2024. You can learn more about the library by visiting buchananlibrary.org or stopping in to see us in downtown Buchanan, Michigan.